Hey, this is Mitchell Sigman for Acoustica Zeros and Ones blog. Today is Super Synth Friday, and I will be talking about the 1979 vintage Korg Delta string synthesizer slash synthesizer. It's kind of a combination of a string synth and a regular synth, and depending on how you look at it, it's either a really limited, kind of weirdly implemented little synth, or it's a really awesome, does slightly strange stuff, super awesome synth, which is how I look at it. Back in the late 70s, there were really a limited number of ways that you could get yourself a keyboard that would play more than one note at a time without spending many thousands of dollars. So there were a couple different approaches you could take. Most of the less expensive synths that played chords were what were called top octave divide synths, which is a fancy way of saying glorified organ, because it's pretty much the same kind of technology that they used to make combo organs in the 60s and big organs like home organs in the 70s, and it was sort of adapted for string machines like the ARP Omni and Salinas, that kind of thing, and a bunch of Japanese ones like the Delta. I'm going to walk you through the sort of string machine synthesizer sandwich that is the Korg Delta and show you how you can combine the two to make really nifty sounds and show you some of its interesting quirks. Over here all the way on the right side of the panel you've got two faders, one that says synthesizer and one that says strings, and these are master faders for each section. So you turn that guy all the way up. Now we're controlling the string section only, and if I play that, we have the distinctive weedy sound of top-down divide strings. There is an octave balance knob, which gives you 16-foot and 8-foot registers, and that's just two different octaves. And you can mix those together to your heart's content. There's a simple envelope generator with attack and release controls, which is really all you need on sustained string sounds, and I'll show you how that works. Or ridiculously long here. And then there's a release. Pretty simple. There's also a trigger mode switch here, which is kind of weird how it works. In single trigger mode, it means the envelope only triggers one time, and then when you press new keys, it doesn't re-trigger. Or if you have it in multiple mode, in theory it should play a new envelope with every key pressed, which is probably how you'd want it, but it doesn't exactly work that way because it's quirky and weird. Listen, if I have a long attack. Now I press another note, and it kind of did the same thing. It dipped a little. Ah, funky 70s technology. Finally, we have an equalizer over here, which does exactly what you think. It has low cut and boost and high cut and boost, and for string sounds that's good because you take the lows, cut them down a little bit, take the highs, crank them up a little bit, and it's beautiful string sounds. Another thing you might notice about the string sound is it has a built-in chorus effect on it. It's not really wet, but it's always there, and it has no controls. It's just always on. So if you're playing strings, you've got chorus. And the octave down. Let's talk about the Delta synthesizer section. Now, calling it an actual synthesizer is a little bit ambitious, because if you look over here in the controls, you'll see there's no waveform selection control like there would be on a conventional oscillator of an analog synth. The reason for this is because of the divide down circuitry we talked about before. Really, it's kind of a glorified square wave organ, and all it makes is square waves. So in this signal generators section, these 4 sliders do exactly what you think. They're square waves. Simple square waves that you can mix together. However, you can do some fun tricks with them, like, and you can play as many notes as you want. Where things get really interesting is if you take these sliders and you set them in a descending fashion like this, and you play, sounds a lot like a square wave, and funny enough, it looks like a square wave. The harmonic series is going downward, much like a real sawtooth wave does. Now, if you put that in an oscilloscope, you would definitely see some stepping on it, and if you compared it with a real sawtooth wave, it's missing a little something, but it's darn close, so that's pretty good, and it works great for bass sounds and makes a fine sawtooth wave. Now here's where the dirty little secret of the Korg Delta's sound generation becomes clear. If I play my sawtooth in the synth section, let's take the synthesizer level knob and go down, and the string section knob, boy, smack a little chorus effect on here, and we have that. Which pretty much gives away that every sound coming out of this is coming from that one top octave oscillator. There isn't really a separate string section and a separate synthesizer section going on in here. It's really just all coming from the same source. But they set it up so you can mix them together however you want. So if you make some funky wah-wah thing in the synthesizer section with the filter or some sort of craziness, you still have your strings doing their chorusy string thing, and you can layer them together. If I make something more interesting here, and mix them together however you like. Moving along with our synthesizer section, the panel layout's a little funky in that the envelope generator sort of comes next if you're going from left to right, but really you should probably think about it as going down to the filter over here. The filter is pretty unique. It's not a conventional Moog type filter. It's, I believe, what they call a Salin key filter, which you can look up on Wikipedia because I don't know what that means. But it's a 12 dB filter, and it has that sort of liquidy, honky sound that old Korgs and Yamahas are known for. It's not an MS-20 filter, but it still sounds pretty cool. If I crank the resonance up, it won't self-oscillate, but it still sounds really nifty. And even better, it has a bandpass mode as well, so it's more nasally if you do that. And if it hasn't become obvious, the cutoff frequency slider is horizontally set up on the panel. Korg did this on a lot of their early synths. They used to call it the Traveler, although they don't here. And I guess they thought people would want to go like... So a strange early precursor to DJ sliders, I guess. I don't know. But it's kind of fun. And like I said, it's a great sounding filter. Moving on, we have an envelope generator. There's just a single envelope generator pretty much for the whole synthesizer section, and it's your standard ADSR. You can set it so it affects the VCA only, meaning that it's a standard amplitude kind of thing. But because there's only one envelope generator, you can't really play it with quick sounds very effectively, because until you let go of the last key, if you hold down keys, you're dead. However, it has a multiple trigger mode, so you can make it re-trigger. But you can hear all my previous keys refiring too. Now, I'll show you later, but that can actually be a really fun feature, even though it's not really how things are supposed to work. There's an envelope generator depth control, and it means I can have the envelope control the cutoff, which is also fun, like this. And I can also switch the envelope to just be more like an on-off on the voltage-controlled amplifier, so now it's just basically doing this for the volume, but it can still affect the filter, and that sounds like this. And if I have it in that multiple trigger mode, you can hear it's doing that weird thing where every key sort of stays on when you hit new notes, but that can be a really fun feature because you can do things like this. And I can move my left hand a lot faster than I can move my right hand, so that works out pretty good. So that's a fun feature, and believe me, there's a lot of really fun stuff you can do using that, like weird stuff you can play, and really like no other synth would really allow that. Moving to the more mundane things, there's a tune thing here, an octave up-down. It's like a master octave switch. There's a tuning knob just for getting in tune with other things. There's an LFO over here, which they refer to as MG, which is not to be confused with the small British sports car that leaks oil. And it sort of works on both the strings and the synth at the same time. So here's my depth. Another weird quirk of the Delta, it has a delay on the vibrato. Did you hear that? I don't know why it does it, but I've owned another Delta and it did it too, so obviously it's inherent to the design, but I kind of like it. It's kind of nice. Strange old synth quirks. Moving along on my panel tour, we have the joystick section, which is obviously the joystick here, and these are really easy to break. The one I used to have had a broken joystick on it. Fortunately, this one works perfect. It lets you control frequency mod, which is pitch, and that works for both the synth and the string section simultaneously. You can turn that on and off with a switch here, and then you can set the depth with this. And you can get that pretty crazy. Or you can turn it off. And you can do FCM depth, which means filter cutoff modulation, which is the filter. Turn that on. That's limited to just a triangle wave, but for vibrato and wah-wahs and stuff, that's fine. You can also have them both at the same time if you like. The joystick also does pitch bends, and strangely these depth knobs simultaneously control the amount of pitch bend or filter cutoff. If I have the switch turned on here for frequency mod, and if I switch it over to filter depth, and that's actually a pretty useful thing to do with a joystick that I don't think a lot of people do, because you can play along with the song. And finally over here we've got this noise thing here where you can use the noise generator as a mod source, for example the pitch, or for the filter. It's a little gross and gurgly there. Here you can see the standard outputs. There's a high level out and a low level out. Unfortunately there's no stereo out, which would have been nice for the chorus, because the chorus could have been in stereo, but it is strictly monophonic. There's also separate direct outs for the synth and strings, and you can see that synth is amusingly spelled with an E over here, so I guess it's synthy. The Delta also has a VCF external voltage control input jack. You could use any sort of standard 0 to 5 volt expression pedal, or you could use control voltage from a modular synth or whatever other analog gear you want. It also has external trigger input and output jacks, and those are kind of fun because you can use those with modular synths and other stuff with trigger outputs. And even though it doesn't have MIDI, you can sort of fake it because you can just sort of hold down chords and externally trigger with it and get really tight rhythms.